This is my buddy Dave's Subaru Crosstrek, and it needs new rear pads and rear motors, which we just so happen to have sitting right here, brand new, for about 1/3 the price he was quoted from the local dealership. And in tonight's episode, I'm gonna be teaching you guys how to swap out your own rear pads and rear motors, and it applies to almost any car out there. Let's get after it. All right, so to bang this out, we need a few things. Floor jack, can of brake clean, brake parts, lubricant, caliper, piston, compressor, more on this in a minute. If you've got locking lugs, get your key, a socket to remove your wheels, various size socket wrenches and sockets for removing the brake components. You may want to have an impact gun to remove the wheels. It just makes life easier. And then a torque wrench for torquing the wheels back on properly when you're done. All right, here's where if you don't have an impact gun, you might want to go ahead and at least loosen the lugs while the car is still on the ground. Otherwise, the tires are going to want to spin when it's in the air. If you do have an impact gun like me, you don't have to do that. So tonight, the first thing I want to do is jack up the car from the pinch weld underneath the car with my jack. All right, just enough to get it off the ground. You don't have to go crazy, lifting it really high in the air, just enough so that the tire spins. Make sure the emergency brake is off, or you're gonna be in a world of hurt trying to do this. Next thing we're gonna do, take your lug key, put it on the lug that has the keyhole. In my case, we have a 19mm socket with impact gun, and you go to town. All right, now that the wheel's off, we have access to the brake caliper, okay? And because we are putting brand new rotors on, which is this right here tonight, we're gonna remove the entire caliper off of the knuckle or the control arm, okay? So there are two 17mm bolts. There's one big bolt right here, and there's another one down here. Hopefully the camera's picking this up. There's one more bolt right here. And we're also gonna go ahead and loosen caliper pin bolts right here while it's on the car, because it'll be easier to loosen while everything's nice and tight and still in the knuckle. Sometimes you have to improvise. I could not get my sockets onto the lower two bolts, as I'm sure you guys just saw in the B-roll. So I had to run over to my workbench and grab my 14mm and my 17mm wrench. Those two bottom bolts were no problem once I improvised a little bit. All right, now normally I would get a caliper hanger and I would hang this by the suspension or something, but there's a nice little nook right here where it sits nicely, so I'm not putting any real pressure on the brake line there. Good to go. We will be compressing this piston in here in 1 minute, but before we get to that, let me just show you guys the main braking components here. So you'll see here, you do have the inside pad. That one right there is the one that makes a squealing noise, in case anybody's ever wondered. When your pads get really low, it starts to squeal. Take note of where that is. You do want to install your brake pads on the same side as they installed them from the factory. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do is remove the old brake pads as well as the old brake pad hardware, these metal things, because the new kit comes with brand new of each. So we're gonna swap those out. Let's do that right now. Those just pop right out very easily. And then the hardware right here, again, similarly, just kind of pop this out. Really should come out pretty easily. Just like that, we're down to a bare caliper right now. All right, so now that the caliper is all off, actually the next thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and swap out the old rotor for the new rotor. So now that the caliper is off, this puppy will slide right off, okay? So you grab it, you literally just wiggle it, and you pull it off, it comes off super easy. Now, some manufacturers have screws in these little holes right here. They screw in to hold this flush to the hub. It's more just to kind of hold it there while you're doing your brake jobs. It's not structural. It will not impact the integrity of your brakes. In this case, this car does not have that. This slides right off. The other thing I just noticed is they do have a rubber grommet on this. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop that out and put that in the new rotor. All right, so we've got our new rotor. We've got the rubber grommet installed. The next thing we're gonna do is actually use our handy dandy can of brake clean right here. Why do we use brake clean? Okay, well, rotors sometimes can sit on shelves for a very long time. They might sit outside. They might get wet during shipping. And manufacturers will often place a layer of oil on the rotors to prevent rust, okay, during storage and during shipping. So what I like to do is I get my brake clean here, I'll get a paper towel, I will soak this with brake clean. And what I do is I rub down all of the brake mating surfaces, which is this surface right here, and this surface right here. Now, this car also has drum brakes as an emergency brake, which means the inside drum right here, okay, also has a mating surface there. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna spray the paper towel with some brake clean, and I'm gonna wipe down all of the brake surfaces. All right, once you got it clean, you can go ahead and shove it right back onto the hub here. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is actually go ahead and just compress this caliper piston back in, okay? So it's gonna go from right where my finger is, pretty much almost flush with this surface right here. This is your piston, okay? This thing right here, okay? That gets shoved back in about 3/4 of an inch right there. That's because new brake pads are thick and old worn down brake pads are thin, okay? The thinner they get, the further this comes out to squeeze your rotor, okay? So we have to actually compress that back in to make space for our new brake pads, or we will not be able to put this back on the car, okay? The other thing just to point out, we're gonna do that with my Amazon tool. Now this Amazon tool was about $15. I will link it in the description below. I will tell you that sometimes Hondas and Acuras, for instance, are famous for this. You actually have to turn your rear caliper pistons like clockwise to get them to go back in. You don't compress them, you turn them and they kind of screw back in, okay? This particular Subaru, the rear caliper is just compressed back in. Now, to the extent you have a Honda Acura or some other maker model, you have to turn your rear calipers back in. And again, I've actually only ever seen this on rear calipers, okay? This $15 tool comes with all sorts of different attachments for all sorts of different makes and models to compress, twist, spin. It kind of has everything in it. And again, I just think it's worth the investment. Now, you can go down to your local hardware store. A lot of the times, your local auto parts store, Advanced Auto Parts, usually has these for rent. And I think it's free if you're bringing them back, not broken. But for 15 bucks, I'll link it in the description below. I don't get any money from that. I just find it worthwhile, okay? Last thing I will tell you is whenever you're compressing caliper pistons, you probably should pop open your master cylinder cap, okay? Because when you compress that piston, all the brake fluid in the lines is gonna come back up to your master cylinder and you want this to be able to breathe, okay? Be careful you don't overflow the master cylinder. If that master cylinder is too full, you're gonna have to suck some fluid out of there somehow, okay? So just be aware of that. And just like that, she's all pressed in. That's as far as it's gonna go. All right, we're in the home stretch, okay? The last thing we have to do right now really is just go ahead and install our new brake hardware onto the caliper bracket here. You do have to get your lubricant and lubricate certain parts, which I'm gonna show you guys here in a minute. But after that, all we actually have left to do is just then install that bracket back on the hub, put the bolts back in, and we're done, okay? So let's keep cranking. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and install the new brake hardware. This is pretty self-explanatory, it only goes one way, but it kind of follows the outline of the caliper bracket here. So we're gonna go ahead and just shove these into the grooves like so. When these are installed properly, you'll know it, you'll kind of feel them pop in, and they'll be nice and rock solid in there, okay? All right, those are in there really nice right now, okay? The next thing that we are now going to do is actually lubricate certain parts to prevent squeaks and squeals for the next 40 to 60,000 miles of your brake pad's life, okay? So where are those areas? Let me put you guys back down and I will show you. You wanna lubricate in here, okay? Because the brake pads move along that, okay? So you wanna put a little bit of lubricant in here on both sides, right there. Same thing on this side, right in there and right in there, okay? You also want to lubricate portions of your brake pads, not the brake surface. I feel like that's a stupid thing to say, but you have to say it in 2024. You want to lubricate here, right around these little outside areas here, again, where these travel along those grooves, okay? So you put a little lubrication on the actual caliper bracket itself. You put a little lubrication here. You also want to put some lubrication on the back of the brake pad, okay, where this surface will be touching that, because again, you know, it's probably not a super high chance of it making a squeaky noise, but wherever with this pushes on the back of the brake pad, you want to put a little bit of lubrication there on the back of the brake pad as well, okay? So the outside corners of the pad right here, and then again, on the actual hardware in the bracket here, you put a little bit in these areas here, okay? And then the last thing we will actually do is we will pull these caliper pins out here, okay? These are lubricated, okay? So this can slide nice and easy in and out as you brake the car, as you brake with the car, okay? I always add a little bit of lubrication to these just to keep these nice and fresh. That's it, just a little bit of lubrication right in the grooves, the gullies, if you will. Again, not a whole lot's needed, just enough to cover just the outside there. Again, we're just going to slide on that pin I showed you earlier, okay? The last thing we're going to do is just going to hit the back of these. You can kind of estimate where it's going to go against the caliper itself, but again, you want to put just a little bit back here, keep the noise down. All right, and then once you're here, you're just going to put everything back together the same way you took it apart. Put the inside brake pad on the inside, and the outside brake pad on the outside, the exact same way you took it apart. Take some pictures when you're doing it just to make sure. All right, and then once the brake pads are back in, we're going to slide the caliper bracket back onto the hub and start putting the bolts back in. Once everything's hand tight, you're just going to bring the caliper back over. You're going to slide that back into place and put the other two bolts back in hand tight. Once everything's hand tight, get your wrenches back out, tighten everything down until it's nice and tight, and you should be ready to rock. Just like that, we're done. Everything is new, everything is nice and tightened down. That's not going anywhere. And before you guys give me a bunch of grief down in the comment section, I did not forget to take out the caliper pins. I did put some bearing grease on those and clean them up, and then I put some fresh grease on them. So I did not forget that. I just forgot to record it, okay? So everything is done. The last thing we have to do is actually just bolt the tire back on to the hub, okay? And that's where our torque wrench comes into play. The torque for this car is about 90 foot-pounds. I'll probably do it up to 100 foot-pounds just to be a bit conservative. That's the last thing we have to do. And then we lower the jack, and then we take the car for a test drive, okay? All right, last little trick of the trade. Don't lower the car all the way down until you torque down the lug nuts, okay? So we're gonna put just a little bit of pressure about right there, okay? Just enough weight so that this tire will not turn anymore, okay? Then you're gonna get your torque wrench. You're gonna set it to either 90 or 100 foot-pounds. You're gonna go in a star pattern. So you're gonna start, you don't go around, okay? You start here, then go over there like a star. You make a star, okay? Once everything's nice and torqued down, then I go around in the circle one last time. All right, and just like that, we're done. I banged out the driver's side off camera in about 15 minutes. Really happy with how this came together tonight. It was a very easy process. Look how nice that new rotor looks in the wheel well. Nothing quite like a shiny new rotor to kind of set off the look of a car. All right, the last thing we have to do tonight is actually bed the brakes. What that means is you kind of embed the new brake material into the new rotor. So you typically want to go from like 50 miles an hour down to like 20 or 25 miles an hour, 3 to 5 times. Hit the brakes really hard. Don't slam on the brakes, but hit them hard. Do that 3 to 5 times to start to bed that material into the new rotor. And then you try to do like a 30 to 15, 3 to 5 times. Then you drive around for 5 minutes, let the brake pads cool, drive home, park the car, and you are done for the night. So again, if you guys got something out of this video, please like, please comment, please subscribe. Until I see you guys again, get in the gym, take care of yourselves, and live your dream. I'll catch you next time.